Duncan Smith, Sir Iain, with me, former Conservative Party leader and MP for Chingford and Woodford Green. And interestingly, Iain's constituency is affected by ULEZ, so that's one point. You were asked a question by Matt. Let's just ask you that quickly. The People's Panel in action here,
Indeed.
Iain. The people can speak directly to the politicians. He's asked you about inflation and how it can be brought down, because obviously we've had this quite high tax budget from Jeremy Hunt. What's your view briefly on that? Well,
I think inflation is going to be coming down, and quite rapidly, fairly shortly, because if you think all the big rises were last year at about this time,
yes.
Well, inflation is a comparator, so they're not going to be rising now, that they're falling, fuel prices are falling, so you'll see this come down, I'm pretty certain of that. The Bank of England's put up the interest rates just recently because of a problem that happened last year, which is all the growing prices for all the crops went up because of fuel costs, and, of course, all the fertilisers went massively up.
Do we think that interest rate will level off now?
I believe now we should have interest rates coming down.
Right.
I'm pretty certain that'll happen. The inflation will probably, they say half, I think it'll probably go more than that. But my general view is right now we've then got to start looking at growth. We've got to get growth going.
Did you think that was a growth budget?
Well, it paves the way to be able to put the stuff in place for growth, particularly. There are some issues that he's done well on, the Chancellor, but on lower taxes...
You'd rather lower taxes.
Oh, yeah, I want lower taxes. I want lower taxes to come down. They help the young man that was actually asking the question, starting out in life. We need those taxes to come down because they're already paying off, many of them, student fees, so we've got to be very careful about
corporation tax hike a mistake?
I was against it, I'll be honest with you. A lot of people were against it. It's been done. I hope as soon as possible we get business taxes down. This is the critical bit. And you were talking about ULEZ on this panel. My area is one of the outer boroughs that is going to be hit by ULEZ. I think it's an utter disaster. There's no need for it. We have environmentally much cleaner air. And so to bring it up there is this terrible mayor's idea about raising money.
Why is he terrible, Sadiq Khan?
Because whenever there's a problem, he seems to slope his shoulders and disappear. And whenever there's something to raise money, he's out there everywhere he goes. He's very anti-car. He forgets that businesses need their cars and their vans to run their businesses. They'll all go hit by this charge. Right now I've got constituents who are having to pay extra money just to cross the North Circular to go to their main hospital. All of this is a problem. If you're a person on your retirement, about to retire or having retired, you'll have bought your last car probably. Now what's going to happen is progressively you're going to find yourself having to pay more money because the choice you made was there would be no ULEZ in your area.
I think there was some research which suggested that any pay rise that public sector workers get, particularly nurses and others who do have to use their cars because they're working antisocial hours, will be wiped out by ULEZ. And people think it's a London-centric problem, but it isn't, because there'll be Sadiq Khans all over the country wanting to bring a ULEZ to a town near you.
I know, and by the way, people come into London for work.
Yes.
So many of those builders, the plumbers, all the various people that have got to come in to do work into my area will actually have to pay more money.
Yeah, funny enough, plumbers and electricians can't come on the tube or ride bikes.
Well, they were told to. Interesting. Somebody said, have a trolley bag that you can carry with you. Has anyone actually seen what a plumber or a builder has to do?
It's absolutely madness.
Just shows how far away and distant are some of these people that run City Hall as to exactly what is going on in London. We need business, we need lower taxes, and we don't need higher charges.
Let's very briefly talk about the lockdown and its impact on young people, because Matt raised it on the People's Panel. Now, I know your think tank, the CSJ, has come out with this very interesting research which suggests that before the pandemic there were 60,000 children who weren't accounted for. They had gone off the school register, never to be heard of again. That number's gone up to 140,000. Why on earth doesn't the government know where these kids are? Why isn't there a register of them? Well,
we at the CSJ have looked at this, and he's right, by the way. The pandemic, lot of damage to young people. First of all, kids starting into businesses, young people learning. How do they learn the ropes when people are not in their offices anymore? All of those things are a damage to them. Also now we find school children. So many schools shut down, and so many kids were not protected. And these come from often lower income groups, sometimes the at-risk groups. Many of them weren't. I mean, if you were a Harris single mother in a tower block, a 10th story of a 19-story building, you've got kids back at home, you're having to work, by the way.
Yes.
All the others that didn't go to work, they went to work to do their deliveries, to do all the Amazon stuff, everything else. We forget about them. They have a struggle. 140,000 kids. That's a 138% rise on where we were before the pandemic. This is a shocking... It's like something like 137 schools having literally nobody in them anymore.
That is horrifying.
They call them the ghost kids because they've disappeared. There's two problems. One is because many of them just disappeared from school and haven't come back. And the other group, there's lots of a change and a shift in some parents about their attitude to whether their kids have to be at school. Yeah. And I think this has all come out of the back of pandemic. Education department's got to do something. Government should make this an absolute central requirement. Lots of things to be done. And by the way, antisocial behaviour, absolutely top marks. Prime Minister's right to say we focus on it. Yes, crackdown, but they've got to do more than crackdown. We have a fantastic organisation called Onside that produces youth clubs which have real activity for people in holidays and in school time. And what you actually get is where they are, there can be a fall of up to 70% in anti-social behaviour.
Yes,
Why?
course.
Because it's a positive. You get kids in doing good things, practical things, learning about responsibility.
You've mentioned the Prime Minister there. You're clearly supporting him, even though I know you backed Boris and indeed Liz Truss, but you voted against the Windsor Framework. Why did you do that, Iain?
For me, it's personal because I served in Northern Ireland and I lost a good friend in Northern Ireland. His body has never been found, by the way. The IRA have been cowardly enough never to tell us what happened to him. He was tortured. I backed the Good Friday Agreement. I think it was peace. I don't want my kids or anybody else's to have to ever go back to a place like that. And I said that for me, the absolute deal is you have to get Good Friday Agreement back up and running. And if you can't do that, then any arrangement you make doesn't work. And until that's happened, I said I would not vote for any agreement that failed to do that at the time.
But obviously the rebellion, I mean, there were 21 or 22 Tories, I think, that voted against. It sailed through the Commons. We've now had this jiggery-pokery on this WhatsApp group. You know, Steve Baker, the former chairman of the ERG, doesn't think the ERG is fit for purpose anymore. You don't need it anymore. Is Brexit dead? Are we over? Is the ERG finished? What's the situation?
No. I think what Steve Baker is a minister, so there are still loads of people on all the groups talking to each other about.
Well, I heard you were removed from a group.
No, I've talked to them all.
So the ERG is still going, but it's less potent than it was.
Well, it depends what you mean potent, really. You have to have a device to be potent. The reality is that bill was always, that statutory instrument was always going to go through because Labour said they'd back it regardless.
Yes.
So it meant there really wasn't anything other than the people... I think something in the order of about 48 people abstained.
So are the Brexiteers behind Rishi or against him?
Well, we want him to succeed. I want him to succeed because the UK needs a good Conservative government that actually delivers lower taxes, more growth. Also, it needs to deliver the best things that came out of leaving, which are regulatory changes that allow us to compete with the rest of the world.
So the government will say, well, this deal does that. This deal opens the way to making more improvements. But do you think it's a bad deal?
No, I didn't. I said it doesn't do enough to do what I absolutely wanted. It's personal for me, and I've said that all along. And the reality is it did make some improvements, but the trouble is right now, Europe needs to recognise what they've got does damage the Good Friday Agreement. Until they're prepared to be reasonable, I've produced an alternative called a whole idea of mutual enforcement. In other words, you each impose each other's rules. You don't need to worry about the border. It can all be done away from the border. So, you know, these are things that can be done. I'm positive about it. But the reality for us is that the government needs to be on the front foot on all these areas, and we need to make sure that people realise that a Conservative government can deliver the things that we voted for at Brexit.
Quick one on Boris. How do you think he did on Wednesday?
I didn't really watch it very much, to be honest with you, because I was busy doing other things.
OK. Is he finished?
Well, I never write anybody off, and certainly not write Boris off. I think the truth is that I worry about these sort of committees of inquiries that come months and months after things have already been settled.
Is it a kangaroo court?
Well, it doesn't seem to me like it was... I just don't think it's necessary, because what are they doing? They're trashing over raking over all the issues that we already know about, that already given evidence about.
Do you think it's a fair process? I mean, he's made comments about Harman's impartiality or lack thereof.
Well, I'm not going to get into games about whether or not people are impartial or not.
But do you think it's kangarooish? I mean,
I just don't think this is what Parliament does well.
No.
It was the beast of Bolsover that used to say that Parliament is at its worst when it tries to be a court of law. And also, I thought the swearing in was very strange because, of course, we are not a court of law. We can't punish somebody for not telling the truth.
What do you make of the sting in The Observer this morning? I don't know if you've seen it, about some of your colleagues, Matt Hancock, Kwasi Kwarteng and indeed Graham Brady, charging up to £10,000 for their services to this, now we realise, fake South Korean company. You've been around the block a bit, Iain. I mean... Do you get these offers? Should you accept these offers? Is Matt Hancock worth 10 grand?
Well, that's for something you have to have him on the programme to ask him
But
about.
what do you think?
Well, I just think all in all that people should smell a rat when somebody comes to them, as it were, unannounced and starts talking to them on a video link about how much money do you want. I think people need to have a little bit of a signal going off in the back of their head that says something very strange about this.
But should these MPs be offering their services for thousands of pounds in this way?
Well, it depends what the services are. I mean, if they're just to talk to them about business or whatever, that's probably okay.
But for 10 grand? I mean, is
Well,
Graham Brady worth 6 grand?
I can't comment on how much they're worth. All I would say is that, by and large, people should recognise that when somebody comes with you offering you gold, you should ask the question why.
Yes, indeed.